Hey there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to Trip Talks. This is the show where I interview successful e commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders and ask them questions about their business story and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today I'm really excited to welcome Dustin Finkel to the show. Dustin is the founder of Ka-Pop, a company that creates genuinely authentic and craveably delicious snacks. And today I'm going to ask Dustin a few questions about his entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that he has used to start and grow his business. So thank you so much for joining me today at Trip Talks, Dustin. Really
I
appreciate it.
really appreciate being here. I look forward to sharing whatever knowledge I can impart, or at least probably all the things I've done wrong that other people shouldn't follow.
So I know you have a really beautiful rack of products behind you. Can you share a little bit about, what products you're selling and what your business is really about?
Yeah. So we are all about bringing authentic, delicious products that have real simple ingredients, which sounds obvious. And it sounds like a lot of people have tried to do that. What I've found, though, there are so many products out there that either don't taste that good or are misleading in what they're offering to the consumer. And so I am really big into health and wellness. I'm a personal trainer. I care a lot about what we eat and what we put into our body. And I have young kids and I care desperately or deeply about what they put in their bodies. And so I wanted to create a snack that we could all feel good about. And I'm a big believer in ancient grains, and they're grains that haven't been hybridized or modified. They're good for the earth. They're good for our bodies. We can talk more about that. And we just kind of popped them one day to see what they would turn out like. And we turned that into a snacking platform where we now have pop chips, we have puffs, we have our recently launched snack rings, and which have actually just won some awards. And we are all about really simple ingredients. So all of our products are just 3 ingredients, 100% ancient grains. We don't have any fillers. There's no corn, no rice, no wheat, cold pressed oil and seasoning. And the crazy differentiator for us, which really shouldn't be, but they taste like the bad versions of what we do. They taste like the big branded versions, and yet they are simple and healthy and non-GMO and vegan and gluten-free and all those things. But they're not taste-free.
Okay, so that seems like you've achieved a kind of this combination of healthy plus tasting good product. How did you come to create this kind of product which tastes good and it has these healthy grains as well? What was the process of developing these products?
Yeah, unlike a lot of entrepreneurs, I don't fit the typical mold of an entrepreneur for a few reasons. One, I'm older. Two, I've had a lot of experience in this industry. I came from food. I've worked at the big consumer packaged goods companies, and so I've seen how the big companies have done it. I also worked for private equities and running smaller companies, so I kind of had the opportunity to really understand what I was getting myself into, and saw a lot of the nuances in product development. That all being said, I didn't intend to start a company. So unlike other people who may have this vision and journey, I'm not that typical entrepreneur. I was stumbling around and found something that was delicious. And as I started commercializing it and working with R&D partners and working with mentors, one of the caveats is I was not going to do this unless it tasted really good. I didn't need to. I had a very firm, solid CEO role in other companies. And so ultimately, that was the mandate. I wasn't going to do this unless it tasted good. That's number one. And then number two is part of being an entrepreneur, and part of the joy of being an entrepreneur is you don't have to settle. Unlike working for other companies or big CPGs or other things, part of the reason people do this is so they can do it their way. And my way was it had to taste good and it had to check these boxes. I'm also confident enough and been in the industry long enough that I know how hard to push. And so when you hear it can't be done, I responded with, well, it probably could be done. Why don't you just try again? And, we would go back and forth. And so, for instance, our vegan cheese, which arguably, and I've heard this time and time again, is one of the best vegan cheese flavors you'll have. It tastes just like Cheetos and other, mainstream brands. Even cheese managers can't tell that's vegan. It took almost a year and a half and probably about 18 versions to get that nailed down. And so it's really about not settling and not compromising and making sure that you understand that you can push until you get what you want. And that's what I tend to do.
So it almost feels like you had your career in the food industry, in the CPG industry, and maybe you had built that level of expertise in this area. Was it that you identified an opportunity and you knew the business enough that you said, okay, maybe there's a gap here. I can figure something out, and let's build a business out of it. Like how much of the inspiration, was it just that you knew the business versus that we can create something healthy and tasting good?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, I'm not the typical. I'm actually more of a pessimist when it comes to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ideas. I usually am telling you the 20 reasons why it's not going to work, or the category is too complicated, or what have you. In my particular reason, I looked for every reason why this would not work. I really tried to validate, instead of trying to find reasons why it would work, I literally went out and tried to find reasons why this would not work. And when I kept getting enough biases towards the opportunities, and trust me, there was many opportunities to improve. And quite frankly, the first 2 years of our business, we were constantly improving and changing and tweaking. But I really looked for reasons why this wouldn't work. And ultimately, our first product, in fact, was popped sorghum, which is like popcorn, except really tiny. And I had worked on that. I had raised money based on that. I had gotten retailer acceptances based on that. It's January of 2018. We were launching April 2018, and I changed the entire platform of the product because I realized that it was the wrong product. And I was keeping my eyes open. I kept looking for the reasons why it wouldn't work. And when I saw those reasons, I pivoted. And that's been the fundamental success of our company thus far. We launched with Pop Chips. It did terrific, but we kept having struggles around identity. And then we discovered the opportunity to do puffs. And we moved into puffs. And had we not done puffs, which is now probably 70% of my business, I don't know if I would have had a business. And now we've launched rings, which are growing like wildfire, the number one launch on Amazon grocery right now. Had we not continued to innovate, I think we would have stagnated and died. And so I approach this as a business person, not necessarily an entrepreneur. That being said, I will say that I have a lot of envy for entrepreneurs because sometimes I do think about this with too much tact, too much of here are the road landmines coming up. Whereas that quote unquote naivety of a entrepreneur who doesn't have as much experience gives them a lot more flexibility and freedom to think bigger. And I think sometimes that's the constraint I have around seeing all the reasons why something might not work.
In terms of manufacturing the product at the beginning, can you share a little bit about, how did you already have your contacts that you knew from your previous experience as an executive? How did you actually bring together to create that first product? What kind of investment went into that? And what kind of lessons can an entrepreneur learn from your experiences?
We could probably do a whole podcast on this topic alone. It's one of the biggest struggles and hurdles that entrepreneurs in the food industry face, especially nowadays with the constraints on co-mans, the lack of willingness of co-manufacturers to work with startups, the minimum order quantities. I mean, there's so many issues. So giving you my story, and then now I actually am a manufacturer now, and I do co-man, so I can talk about it from both sides. But early on, it was one of the hard lessons that I learned, that despite all my connections and all the, accolades I had in my career, co-mans don't want to work with startups. And there's a lot of good reasons why. And the reason I was able to offset a lot of them is because, and this is the same reason I think we were successful in raising a lot of money pre-revenue. I think this is why we were successful in getting out the door a lot quicker, is we presented ourselves with a understanding of the business. Now, obviously that came through because I did have an understanding, but really I made sure that I vetted my presentation, my sales pitch, my documents, my financials with a lot of people and get a lot of feedback. So when I presented them to people who quote unquote mattered, co-manufacturers, potential investors. We came as if we knew what we were talking about. And we got a lot of pats on the back for saying, wow, this is really well presented. You clearly know what you're talking about. Your numbers seem like they make sense. We didn't come with that kind of blind optimism that a lot of entrepreneurs come to. And I see that constantly in my current role running our manufacturing entity, where there's just this blind optimism, which is fantastic, but without the reality of all the implications of what really needs to happen. I came prepared. And so before the co-man would say, hey, have you thought about this? We had already addressed X, Y, and Z. And so it really presented a confident level. But I still heard a lot more no's than yeses. I still got a lot more pushback. And it took a while to find the right partner. So that's one lesson, is being really well prepared with your story, with your reason to believe, with your numbers, and why they should invest behind you. Because even if they're not giving you dollars, they're investing line time, resources, etc. I'll say the other thing now as a co-man that I see constantly, and I've heard this from other co-man leaders, is people really not understanding what their product is, understanding how it's made, understanding what it takes to commercialize it. Again, this goes back to that optimistic thinking, which is great, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs who come in and they have XYZ product. They think it's going to be successful. And as you get to talking to them, they don't really understand what it takes from making a product, developing a product, producing a product, packaging a product, distributing the product, and then selling it on shelf. They only know that they want to make this product. And when we see that, it raises all kinds of red flags. And so we tend to look at those with a lot of skepticism, because it's not that I don't believe in their product or believe in them. I tend to give a lot of free advice, sometimes unsolicited, to these entrepreneurs because I want them to understand that making the product is probably one of the easier parts to the whole game. And so that's a lesson, is being prepared. And this is about co-mans, it's about investors, it's about retailers. They want to feel like they're partnering with something that makes sense, because keep in mind, they are investing in you. Whether it's finance or resources, they are investing behind you. Same with retailers.
So you had this product. Can you share a little bit about how you launched it first? And was it directly through retail channels?
You know, it's funny. I grew up, as I call it, in the traditional CPG space, which is brick and mortar. But I thought, oh God, we can launch on Amazon and Shopify, and this is gonna be a piece of cake. And boy, did I learn how wrong. I talk about one of the biggest learnings I've had, which is how hard e-commerce is, which is why there's great people like you helping the citizens of the world out. But so we tried to launch on e-commerce and didn't really get as much traction as I had anticipated. So I went back to what I knew, which was brick and mortar. And so we created kind of a two-pronged strategy in brick and mortar. I called the ground and pound, which is I just went to, no different than any other entrepreneur, I went to all my local natural food stores. Luckily, I live in Boulder, so there are a lot. But I went to my natural stores. I went to hardware stores. I went to coffee shops. I went to anyone that would listen, and I pitched my product. And so we started gaining that distribution, just like anyone else. I was driving around my truck delivering product. Meanwhile, this is where I was leveraging my connections to get meetings with the bigger retailers. The bigger retailers, though, despite all my connections in the world, didn't want, Kroger wasn't going to take me on day one. But what it did allow me to do is learn kind of what I needed to pitch, what they were looking for, what I needed to establish. And ultimately, they want to see proof of concept. And so I leveraged ultimately about 150 independents between Colorado and Chicago, ironically, to create this proof of concept, to drive velocity, to drive awareness, which then started escalating our relationships. The other thing that we did is we entered a lot of pitch slams. So we did as much of that quote unquote free PR as possible. And we won a lot of pitch slams. And we went really aggressive at selling. Anyone who knows me, and including if you watched on Shark Tank, which I will talk about this in a second, knows that I love to sell. I sell. And one of the stories I always talk about is the first investor I ever had was a guy sitting next to me on an airplane, complete stranger. By the end of the flight, he was my first investor. I am always pitching my business. You never know who you're talking with. You never know who you're sitting next to. You never know. I'm always pitching. And in fact, that's how I got on Shark Tank. These two women were staring kind of at the booth when we were at Expo West. I jumped right on them. I said, hey, my name's Dustin Finkel. This is the greatest snack in the world, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh my God, you'd be great on Shark Tank. And I was like, what? That's going to be amazing. Always, always, always be pitching your business, selling your business. If you ever see us at trade shows or demos, we are driving the biggest crowds because we do not let anyone go by without hearing our little pitch.
So at the end of the day, it's really about, you're a great salesperson. Of course, you built a great product, but at the end of the day, if you can't sell it, if you can't sell it to people, businesses, then it's not going anywhere. So I think that's.
I will tell you this. I've advised a lot of entrepreneurs, and I have met with certain entrepreneurs who cannot sell. I don't know, without insulting them, they are not the best salespeople in the world, right? And it makes me concerned. If you can't sell your own product, how is somebody else going to sell your product? Yeah. Now, that being said, there are plenty of products that have succeeded without the founder being a good salesperson. That is 100% true. So clearly that works. But for me, what has really worked is that I can sell this like nobody else can. The difficulty for me is trying to help other people sell as well as we can. But in the end, I mean, no one's going to care as much about your business, your product, your service as much as you do. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone care as much as you do? And so that's fundamentally why I think selling, but always, always, always know that the next conversation is the most important conversation. I've gone through days, especially when I've pitched, 10 investors in a day, for instance, and you've heard no 9 times. You still have to go into that 10th being like, this is the one. It's so hard, but you never know. You just never know.
So I will ask you a question that I have been trying to figure out something myself. It seems like, as a great salesperson, as someone who is able to pitch their ideas to a lot of people, you meet a lot of, new people. You have a great network probably also. Can you share a little bit about, how do you build a big professional network? Someone sitting next to the plane, to your seat in a plane, and you're pitching your ideas to them. Like, what does it take? And then, even if the person doesn't do business with you, like, are you still keeping in touch with them? Like, how do you build your network so that it helps you take you to the next level personally and professionally?
Such a great question, and I'm glad you asked this. And it's one actually I preach a lot. So I got lucky in figuring this out. I had worked for a company called Famous Brands, which was Mrs. Fields and TCBY and others. And I, along with a lot of other people, got laid off after a big restructuring, and I kind of had the summer off. And I wasn't exactly sure where I wanted to go. I knew I had aspirations, but I decided to make networking my job because I had the flexibility and freedom to. And so, my wife at the time was like shocked by how aggressive I did this, but every day I found 3 people at least to meet with every day. And in some days I didn't accomplish my goal, but that was my goal, every day 3 people. And at the end of every meeting, I would say to them, hey, well, let me back up. One of the other things that I was very fortunate in doing is I didn't have anything I was trying to get out of them. I was really just trying to learn, get to know people, expand my network. That's the first lesson, is when people network with you and they are trying to get a job, or they're trying to get money, or it puts people, even when it doesn't necessarily aggressively so, puts people on the defensive a little bit, right? And so I think it's really important, if you can, to try and network before you actually need something. It's a lot easier if you and I have a relationship for me to come and ask you for something than on the first time we meet, say, can you do X, Y, and Z for me? Yeah. That's lesson number 1. The second lesson, and this was a huge one that I stumbled upon, and I've given this to a lot of people, and people have done this with success, is at the end of the meeting, the only thing I would ask for is, can you introduce me to 2 people who I don't know? And that's how I kept building this network. And I will tell you, 85 to 90% of the subsequent meetings were quote unquote worthless, right? In the definition of, did they lead to anything? But you build this network, and I built this entire network. Now, ultimately, at the end of the summer, I got a job that had nothing to do with any of the networking I did that summer. So you'd say, okay, that was a waste. Well, just like you said, I really made it my mission, because it's so hard to do this when you don't need something, is I made it my mission to every week reach out to one or two of the people I met and just keep the conversation. How you doing? Checking in, hope all is well. When I started Ka-Pop, that network I created that summer, 3 summers ago, is what I would not have had this company without it. The people came out of the woodwork to help me, to point me in the right directions, to invest in me, to point me to new investors, to retailers. That network single-handedly helped me get Ka-Pop off the ground. And that was 3 years later. So as I always say, you never know where the relationship is going to go. Just because it's not going to pay off today doesn't mean it won't pay off tomorrow, a week, or 2 years. The hardest part, though, is doing it without, when you don't need something. And 2, doing it in a way where you're authentically just trying to get to know people.
And then, so just to follow up on that, so when you're asking, because I'm very interested in this, I'm trying to build my network. So when you're asking people, so you met someone, and at the end of the meeting, you're saying, can you introduce me to 2 other people? That's kind of an ask, right? I mean, if the person is here, the relationship is new, the person is asking, now this is like a task for me. How do you manage that?
Well, of the asks that most people ask, though, that's a relatively minor one, because I'm typically not asking for a specific person, because I might say, okay, I know that Jack Welch. Okay, I want you to introduce me to. That's different. This is like, hey, I hope I had a great conversation. I would love to be introduced to 2 other people you think might be interesting for me to meet with. Worst case, they don't do it. 90%, I never had anyone not do it, right? And so if you propose it really authentically and genuinely, like you're just open to meeting people, again, it's very different if you come to me and you saw that I know XYZ person and you're trying to use me to get to them. That's very different, right? So that's the first thing. And I want to come back to the prior question. The other thing too, by the way, about like the plane thing, this I stole from I went to Kellogg Business School at Northwestern, and our old dean, he had this philosophy, and God, people hate doing this, but it's so powerful. When you're sitting on a plane or anywhere really, you don't know who's sitting next to you. Take 2 minutes and start a conversation with them. In 2 minutes, you'll know, okay, I don't want to talk to this person, and you move on. But the amount of time I have gained multiple investors, believe it or not, more than one investor from talking to a stranger on a plane. I have gained context into multiple suppliers, vendors, resources from my conversations on planes. And it's just simply a quick conversation. Hey, what do you do? What do you do? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, have a good flight. Or, oh, that's interesting. I can get something out of this. And that's selfish, but that's what business is about. And so when I say always do that, and it's been so powerful. And I'll also be honest, a lot of times I will pay for myself, not using company's money, to upgrade. And if you can upgrade for $100 or $150, you tend to have that opportunity more often in first class than you are in coach on United, at least. And so, but that's not, it's happened to me a lot of times in coach. So that's not to knock, this is like elitist classist, but you tend to have more successful business leaders sitting in first class. And so I've had a lot of those conversations sitting in first class. That's
a very interesting point. Like I guess you have to be where other successful people are. Otherwise, you're meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it does matter. So I know someone introduced, or someone said that you would be great for Shark Tank. Can you share a little bit about your Shark Tank experience?
Sure.
What did you do to prepare for it? What was the outcome, and what was your overall experience?
So this is something I live and breathe by. Although, to be truthful, I've gotten a little worse at this over the last few years as I've gotten busier and busier. But the more prepared you can be for opportunities, the better. Even the opportunities you don't know are opportunities. So, i.e., those 2 women staring at my booth, I didn't know where they were from, but I was well prepared with my sales pitch. I could do that back, all day long. And, as they say, the elevator pitch or whatever you want to call it. And so being prepared is really critical. So when we got the opportunity to go on Shark Tank, even though we were discovered and didn't apply, and even though we were fast tracked, we still had to go through all the application process that anyone else would go through. And so the first thing is, just like anything else in life, people want to work with people that are easy to work with or are friendly to work with. So why not be both? So I made it my mission for our producers to be the easiest and most friendly people to work with. What did that mean? Number one, friendly is friendly. But number two is I would beat every deadline they gave me, and we would do it full tilt. Never half-assed anything, but we would also beat every deadline. They say, hey, on a Monday, we want this by next Monday. They would have it in a day. I FedExed overnighted documents to them instead of sending it, mail, regular mail. Everything I did was in that intent to make their lives easier. So that's number one. The second thing is actually getting on the show preparation. So I get a lot of accolades for how well I handled the questions on Shark Tank and handled the investors. And really, it goes credit to my team and the people around me who helped me. We watched nearly every single episode for the last 3 or 4 years. We wrote down every question that was asked. And I practiced every single question that was ever asked of anybody over and over and over again. And then I had my investors, my current investors, grill me and rip me apart. And so that, even the worst things wouldn't faze me. And so again, being prepared so that when you get on stage, which is incredibly nerve-wracking, and as I always joke, I blacked out during my pitch, it's so much going on, it's crazy, that I knew when I got to my question part, that was easy part.
How many questions were there when you created the list of questions from previous episodes?
Oh my God. This is so long ago now, but I want to say in the hundreds. There's a lot of duplicates, right? There's a lot of questions that they ask. It's the same question, just asked maybe 10 different ways, right? Yeah. And so we obviously consolidated if it was the same bucket, and we divided and conquered. But that list of questions really helped me prepare for the experience. And then in terms of the pitch, practice. You don't get a second chance. And so, the reality, we're having this podcast right now. I have the opportunity to pitch to a big retailer tomorrow, which is I'm traveling right now. And I'm going to make sure that I am prepared, because I can go in, and even though I can do my pitch in my sleep now, you don't want to miss the opportunity, right? And so preparation is key.
And so you will be preparing in front of a mirror. How do you prepare?
That's a great question. It depends. Sometimes I'll get somebody to sit on a Zoom with me and just listen to me do my pitch. Sometimes I'll have people grill me. I'll say, what do you think they're going to dislike? I always try and find the angles of why things aren't going to work, because if you can handle those, the easy things are when it goes well. How do I offset why this wouldn't work? And so, but the other thing, and I don't know if this is a natural ability or it can be taught, but the ability to BS, and I don't mean bullshit as in lie, apologies for the swearing, but not lie. I mean the ability to just be quick on your feet and understand. And so one of the other things about sales is adaptability. And I think one of the skill sets that I have that, again, I didn't think was unique, but I'm finding maybe is that I can have a conversation with a 70-year-old CEO from, the old school and be very proper, not wear a hat, but, dressed up very proper. And I can have that conversation. And then 10 minutes later, I can go have a conversation with a 22-year-old hotshot tech CEO and be able to hang with him, and so on, or her, and so on and so forth. And so the ability to adapt your characteristics, your personality, and not be fake, but just adapt, being adaptive, I think is huge. And so I go into those presentations never knowing what they're going to be like. Now, any chance I can, I will ask somebody if they know someone. Is this person serious? Are they jovial? Do I need to be more conservative? What's their personality? But the best way is to try and start by shooting the proverbial S on life stuff. Like, oh, how's your weekend? What did you do? And if they engage, that takes you one direction. If they're like cut you off very quickly, you're like, okay, it's all business. You can kind of gauge that quickly.
Um, Working with retailers and getting your product sold through that channel, can you share a little bit about, I'm sure there's tricks to the trade. I'm sure, not everybody, who puts their product on the shelf gets the same kind of traction. Can you share like what, I've heard like, it could be difficult from like managing inventory perspective and retailers take a bigger chunk of the profit and those kind of things. Can you just share a little bit about, what this side of the business is about and how some of the things that you learned to be successful?
Retailers get a bad name in this business, and it's really not the retailers. I would say the food industry is fairly inefficient. There's a lot of players. And so if you've ever bought a house, as an example, you'll know that you get all these documents to sign, and there's appraisers and there's title companies and there's mortgage companies. And you're like, who are all these people and these thousands of documents I need to sign? The food industry is similar in that there's a lot of players between your product and the end consumer. There's the retailers, distributors, merchandisers, brokers, resellers. There's just so many players to this game, and to do it effectively, there's a lot of players involved. And so retailers, I don't think, deserve all the negativity. In fact, retailers in most cases that I've been in part of, like Kroger, has been phenomenal to work with. Even the ones that may be scary, like Walmart, they've all been pretty good to work with here. And so it's not the retailers. What I will tell you is the difficulty isn't even getting on shelf. It's moving off the shelf, getting your product to sell. As everyone will talk about in this industry, it's not distribution, it's velocity. Velocity is how fast the product's selling off shelf. That's what people care about. But to answer your initial question, how you get it on shelf, it's, I've had the opportunity to have introductions through the network that I've created. So it goes back to network, that helped early on. Now, as we are a little bit bigger and my network of connections has kind of, reached its max, Kroger is a perfect example, putting myself out there. We built our relationship with Kroger through two ways. One, I built a really strong relationship with one of our distributors who introduced me to a buyer. Again, just building a good relationship with the network and having a good product. The second one was at a trade show, again, stopping everyone who comes by and building that relationship. I was recently at Sweets and Snacks, which is a show in Chicago, and it's become much more of a snacking show and a natural food show. Just by engaging people, we now have incredible meetings coming up, including the one tomorrow at a very, very major retailer, and another one in a month with one of the largest, if not the largest, pharmaceutical chain in the country, by those conversations. And then again, going back to what I said about Shark Tank, I make it easy to work with me, I make it fun to work with me, and I make sure they know that we are going to have a good partnership. People want to work with so despite them being huge companies, just remember this. You work at big companies, I've worked at big companies. Companies are still just people.
Yeah.
The engine will keep moving regardless. If you and I leave, the engine will keep moving. But in the end, it's people. It's all about people.
And then the second part of the question, how do you move the products off the shelf? Is this that you have to spend some of your own money marketing those products, or
Got it, yeah. Well, yeah, if I knew all that answers before they're long, but I'll tell you this. The simple answer is this: is getting secondary placement, in my opinion, is the simple answer. How you do that is the hard part. So yes, there's a thing called trade, which is part of your P&L, where you have to invest fairly significantly on in-store activation. So every time your product's on sale, consumers don't realize this, but the brands are paying for that to be on sale. We're funding that sale, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one way, is driving incremental sales, because people like to see sales. Mm-hmm. But if you think about this more importantly, I'm in the chip category or the salty snack category. I'm a new brand. As much as I like to think people know who I am, we probably have, 1% awareness, if that, right? And so as people walking by a set with 1,000 other SKUs, and they see my 3 products on shelf, it's not even going to register with them necessarily.
Mm.
So that's why I invest heavily on driving secondary displays, on shippers, on partnership activations. But yes, this is all investment that you have to make. It's not going to sell itself. This is going back to entrepreneurs with co-packers. A lot of conversations, they don't realize that. It's not going to sell itself. Everyone likes to think their product is so good, people are going to discover it, it's going to sell itself. It's not going to sell itself. And I hate to be repetitive and beat a dead horse, but one of the things that the reason I think we also get incremental off-shelf placements, incremental placements, is because I also build those relationships, again, relationships with the retailers. And so when they're looking like, who do we want to support? They're looking at how well the brand's performing. They're looking at who's investing the most dollars. But let's be honest, they're also looking at who do they want to support? Who do they want to invest behind? And I like to try and make them think that we are one of those brands they should invest and support with their dollars, not just our dollars.
And in terms of awareness, like, do you consider doing like more of, television advertising or, internet advertising, really just to get your brand a little bit more recognized by the people? Is that something also part of what you do, or is this something that's for the future?
Yeah, I mean, this becomes where dollars and cents matters, right? What's your funding? What's your gross margin? How much can you support? The financial realities of your brand are really, really important. This is another piece that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand as well as the financial aspects of the business. Marketing I believe in the retail channel. As a small company, the majority of your marketing dollars should be spent in store. So trade activity, off-shelf placements, trade activities, right? Because there are so many marketing messages consumers are getting hit with, and unless you can compete with that, Gecko selling car insurance, there's just too much going on, right? And so when people are in that mode shopping now with Instacart, how do you sell on Instacart? How do you do brick and click? But the other piece is really what I would call 2 parts of marketing that I really like to invest in. One is PR, not paid for PR necessarily, but how do you get PR through other activities that you do, like the pitch slams, winning events, winning contests? How do you drive PR, more organic PR? And then the second, I would say, is digital marketing. In today's day and age, there is very few things as good as digital marketing. In fact, I'm still shocked by this, but email marketing is incredibly powerful, which blows my mind because I don't understand how it works, and considering that I get 1,000 emails a day and you don't care, but it works.
Mm-hmm.
And then the new one that, I still consider digital is text-based marketing. Another one, this is why as we get older as leaders, you got to start relying on younger people to tell you what's cool and what's not and what will work. Because to me, getting text, but even I get texts now that are targeted and they work. And so text-based marketing, email-based marketing, and then really specific, dedicated Amazon or Shopify-based marketing. I am not personally a big fan of Facebook or Instagram messaging because they make it insanely difficult to monetize that. They are incredibly tough to work with from an algorithm perspective. And I've personally never seen a big return. That being said, so many other brands have success there. So, maybe I'm just not good at it.
Can you share a little bit about your team? How big is your team?
Teams, everything. I keep learning that every single day. For the first 2 years, it was just me and basically 1 and 2 other people. Very, very small, very lean. Which was good economically, but I will say in retrospect, we worked way too hard and way too aggressively for the size I had. And that's still probably a problem I have today. Now that we're a manufacturer, I have one of the other things we talked about Ka-Pop, but I combined with another company called Bubba's Fine Foods, now called B Fine Foods. They are granolas, snack mixes, keto, paleo. We are under the umbrella of Awaken Foods, which also has Awaken Food Crafters, which is a manufacturing entity. So I thought, why not make my life as crazy and insane as possible? And so now we have in the neighborhood of 45 or so with 50 people. I'd say the large majority are factory workers who are incredibly important to us in developing and building our products on a day-to-day basis. And then we have our management team, head of operations, I have what I call a chief of staff who is wonderful and kind of takes all the projects. I have our COO, head of R&D, supply chain, etc. So all these people really are integral. But I will tell you, my biggest fault in building this, because we've grown pretty fast to the size we're at, is not building enough of a human foundation from a position standpoint to support the growth. And so we are constantly paying for that and constantly trying to catch back up to putting the right people in the right seats with the right structure. So, I will tell you, I have a peer who I went to undergraduate business school with, who's very, very successful. He started up a healthcare company that he makes me look like a very insignificant, successful businessman. And I was talking to him and getting advice from him. And, he was the first person to ever tell me one of the people he highly recommends early is having a head of talent or HR. And I am like very opposed to HR from a standpoint of function. It's a cost center. But in today's day and age, with the changing culture, dynamics of people, mobility of people, the great resignation, all of those things, I could not agree more that having somebody that really helps you with people is so undervalued and so underrated.
Yeah, I think I read something similar with Netflix. I think they had like the head of HR at the very beginning, and it was like that's what was driving their need for future talent and things like that, and that's
Yeah.
a big part of how they built the business.
They focused. I have Netflix's like original deck from a long time ago. Somehow I got my hands on it, and it's all about culture and what they stood for, and they really put a lot of effort into that. And it wasn't lip service, and that's where a lot of companies, even including mine, I think, really struggles. You come up with this cultural values and missions, and then no one really follows them on a day-to-day basis because you're so mired in the weeds. I think that's what did make Netflix very successful, is that they really held to that, even when it makes it hard. Now, as I say, money won't make you happy, but it sure solves a lot of problems. And so when you have a lot of money, like Netflix ultimately has, and things like that, it allows you the flexibility to be a little more stringent on who you hire, the talent, all of those things. Where we've hired amazing people, but we don't have the opportunity to hire the most experienced, most talented person for every position.
Now, you started the interview with saying you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur. As a business person, what do you see your business like? What is the end game for your business? I would assume like an entrepreneur would say, I made this business successful. Let's sell this. Let's go to the next idea, build another business. How do you see the future vision for your business? Do you want this to be your life's work, or do you have any other plans for this?
The best way I can answer that is, it's funny. My son, who's now 10, the last couple of years, he's always said when he grows up, he wants to be the CEO of Ka-Pop, which I take as, it's incredibly heartwarming. But my joke, my kind of response is, if I'm still CEO when you're old enough to be CEO, I've done something majorly wrong. So, my goal is to build a company that is successful. I used to have this goal of to build a big company and sell it for hundreds of millions of dollars and do all that kind of stuff. As I've grown this and we've created this organization, I don't really know what success looks like anymore. Now, that's a horrible answer and probably one I shouldn't say. But to me, the definition of success is that I continue delivering great products, that I'm able to continue hiring great people, and that we return investment dollars to our investors. That to me is success. Now, whether that's a sale to somebody else, whether that's organic growth, whether that's continuing to acquire other companies, I don't really know at this point. But I will tell you that I find it incredibly heartwarming when people love my products, that I'm able to employ 40 plus people. I'm able to provide amazing products to the consumers and great relationships. And right now that means success to me, but we'll see what that means in a few years.
Now, in every business person's journey, there's always some mistakes made, failures, lessons learned. Can you share maybe your biggest mistake that you think, and what is the lesson that you learned? What is the lesson that other entrepreneurs, other business people can learn from it?
I have made more mistakes than I can possibly acknowledge, unless you gave me like 24 hours of podcast time to do. And I don't mean that flippantly. Like, I really have made a lot of mistakes, and I genuinely hope I learn from them. And I've already begun learning from them, even within this current, job and world and role. God, there's so many. I'd say the biggest single-handedly is people. Um, and for me, it's what I mentioned before, is the right structure, having the right team. But two is, I built an organization that started growing into something complicated and more structured. And I don't think I respected that enough for how I needed to lead the organization, what my expectations of people needed to be in the organization, where I needed to hold people accountable to that kind of level of ownership and responsibility and professionalism. And so one day you try and flip that switch, and if you haven't been building towards that, that creates a lot of problems. And so, the best thing I can tell you and tell anyone is having great people around you is just paramount. But what great people around you look like is going to constantly change during your journey. And so I'm very fortunate right now to have the best people around me. But when I first started, I had great people around me, but that constantly needed to change, and I needed to change as quickly as they did.
Now we're going to move on to our rapid fire round. And in this round, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and you have to answer them maybe in one word or one sentence. Okay. So the first one is a book recommendation for entrepreneurs or business professionals.
That's easy because I've done this and people love this recommendation. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's written by Chris Voss, the ex-head of FBI International Negotiation. If there's one business book that you're going to read on like business tactics, that's it. However, to caveat, I'm going to break your quick round. I'm a big fan of the classics, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think those books are timeless classics that everyone should read, but never split the difference.
An innovative product or idea in the current e-commerce, retail, or tech landscape that you feel excited about?
Like I said, this isn't super innovative. I just think it's well done. Is the opportunity to personalize text-based platforms based on geolocation and need state, I think is really, really powerful. And so while people sometimes complain about that, being able to be targeted based on that need state and geolocation is very, very powerful.
A business or productivity tool or software that you would recommend, or a productivity tool? Of course, you're working.
I'll give you two, as always. One is Calendly. I think a lot of people have heard of this, but I resisted it forever. It's so awesome to be able. You can set up all kinds of different parameters. It lets people schedule time on your calendar without you having to go back and forth, and you can have multiple different versions. So you can have like a VIP version. It's super great. The second is DocSend, DocSend. It was just bought by Dropbox, I believe. And DocSend allows you to control presentations, control investor materials, and you put it on there, you can send it out, and it allows you to control who goes into it. That's number one. But number two is it actually lets you track where people engage in your deck, where they spend the most time on, where they fall off, where they stopped engaging. And so what that allows you to do is, and I did this prolifically, is I kept changing my deck based on the reports and analysis that I saw of how people engaged with my materials. And it's a powerful tool.
That's great. A startup or business in e-commerce, retail, or tech that you think is currently doing great things?
Well, I'll call it, I'm jealous of them. So today, Magic Spoon, which is an really e-com based keto cereal, they didn't do any retail. I think just announced an $85 million raise today, which I'm jealous about. And they found a niche. They executed well. They did great e-commerce platform work. They demonstrated that you do not need to be in retail to be successful, and it paid off for them today.
A peer entrepreneur or business person whom you look up to, or someone who inspires you?
I'll give you again two answers. One is every entrepreneur, and I don't mean this cliche, but every entrepreneur inspires me because again, feeling like I'm not a true entrepreneur, I look at these people who come into industries with zero understanding what the industry is, and they are successful and they push through. I came in with 17 years of experience and it's still freaking hard. I'm so impressed and humbled and envious of these people who just who have a passion and they do it, and they don't know what they're doing and they still do it. So I truly authentically mean that. The second is, there's a guy, it's funny because when we first met, I really didn't like him. His name is Dean Eberhardt. He started a company called Hoplark. And he's just very powerful at helping you think through problems in a way that you might not have otherwise thought about them. And so he's a peer, but I just love having peers. And that's one thing I will tell you: if you start a company, find a peer group, find other people, because even if it's about commiseration, that's fine. Just have a group.
Great. Last question. Best business advice you ever received or you would give to other entrepreneurs or business people?
Whoa, best business advice I've ever received. Well, I'll just give you the one that I give to people. Not fun, not exciting, not sexy. Know your numbers. Know how to read a P&L. Know how to analyze a balance sheet and cash flow statement. It's amazing to me how many entrepreneurs and just business people in general do not understand finance. It's what separated me in my career. It's what allowed me to be more successful. It's what's allowed me to raise money faster. It's what's allowed me to have better conversations with retailers about margins and trade. And the ability to talk in numbers will differentiate you against 99% of your competition. And so boring. I teach at University of Colorado in marketing and business, and I have the same conversation. They all hate me for saying this. Know your numbers. Finance, finance, finance.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dustin. Really, really appreciate all the insights that you shared, your business story. So thank you so much again for joining me today at Trip Talks, and really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.